Joe, at some point in the last year, you searched for something you'd rather not explain. So maybe it was, I don't know, a medical symptom you didn't want to mention to anyone. Maybe it was a legal question. Maybe you looked up how to pick a lock because you were locked out of your house and you'd forgotten.
But in my
Or you searched for something about an ex, or you read about something genuinely dark because you were trying to understand it, or there was a whole other category of stuff out there. And for weeks afterwards, your ads changed. The system noticed. So it logged what you searched, it matched it to a pattern, and it drew a conclusion about who you are based entirely on the behavior, with no access at all to the reason. You were locked out of your house. The algorithm followed you under potential burglar, or maybe something worse. You were researching an illness for a family member. The algorithm flagged you as a health risk, which, if you're in the United States, may have affected what you see when you apply for insurance. You were trying to figure out something terrible about the world. The algorithm decided you might be interested in more of it. In every case, it's the same operation. Your behavior entered a system. The reason for your behavior was invisible to that system. What the system retained was the pattern, and through the pattern drew a conclusion. And this is called context collapse. It's not a bug. It's a fundamental structure of how every algorithmic system in your life works.
So last episode, the Hitler books, your mom, Amazon. I've been thinking about it since we recorded, man. I can't stop thinking about it.
Oh yeah, what's stuck?
Well, the part about there being nobody to explain it to, it feels like it's everywhere once you start noticing it. Like I hadn't seen it before. Now that I see it, I can't unsee it.
Well, it is everywhere, right? Every system that processes your behavior, every platform, every app, every institution that uses algorithmic decision making, which is every institution these days, has the same structural problem. It can see what you did. It can't see why. And the why is usually entirely the point.
So what I got is that context collapse isn't just an Amazon thing.
Well, Amazon is just the version that happens to be maybe harmless. I don't know. It was certainly harmless when it was suggesting things to my mother, but I'm not sure where that's gone now and what data they sell about you. So this episode is about the mechanism, where it comes from, why it's unavoidable, given how these systems are built, and what it actually does to you at scale. Here's the pattern. Same structure over and over. You read a series of articles about political controversy, trying to understand multiple sides. The algorithm doesn't see person seeking balance. It sees reading time, click behavior, content categories. It files you under an engagement profile and starts serving you more of whatever kept you reading the longest, which was probably the more extreme version. You buy a book about addiction because your brother is struggling. Not really, but that is a hypothetical situation, right? And the algorithm doesn't see worried sibling doing research. It sees a purchase in a category. It starts surfacing related products and content, support group resources, maybe, recovery memoirs. But also, the algorithm has now categorized you.
And that categorization, it just follows you around.
It follows you everywhere, right? It informs what you see. In some systems, it informs decisions that are made about you without your knowledge and without any mechanism for correction. You visit a neighborhood in your city you've never been to before. Your phone logs the location. The algorithm doesn't know you were visiting a friend or going to a job interview or got lost. It knows you were there. And location data aggregated over time is used to build a profile that insurers, employers, and government agencies can purchase. So you pause for 4 seconds on a social media post about a conspiracy theory. You don't believe it. You're horrified by it. But the algorithm doesn't see horror, it sees engagement. It serves you more and more. And in every case, the thing that would explain your behavior, the context, the intention, the reason is invisible to the system. And the system makes consequential decisions about you anyway.
That's the mechanism.
That's the mechanism. The term context collapse actually comes from a researcher named Danah Boyd, and she studies social media and its effects. And she originally coined the phrase to describe something slightly different from what we're talking about, but the underlying idea is the same.
So what was her original definition?
So she was studying what happens when you post something on social media. And the thing that she noticed was when you speak to a friend in person, you have an audience. You know who they are. You adjust what you say based on that context, their relationship to you, what they know, what they'll understand. Now, when you post on Facebook, you're suddenly speaking to everyone simultaneously, your boss, your grandmother, a stranger who found your post through a mutual friend, an algorithm. All of them see the same words and none of them have the same context. If you think about it, we keep the context of what's private separate from the context of our work lives. So now the audience gets collapsed into a single flat surface. There's no distinction between private and work. It just is. And because you can't speak to all those people at once, because they have different contexts, different relationships, different information, you can't control how your words land. The meaning collapses.
Yeah. So you say something to your friends and your boss sees it. I can see that and reads it completely differently than the way
Well,
your
I mean,
friends.
you've had a job before, right? And
Yeah,
there's stuff that you might
I
say
know.
to your friends, I think, once or twice, that you don't necessarily want your boss to hear.
Yeah.
Right? You have a private context where you might complain about your boss. And you know what? That might be okay because you need that space to complain about your boss, right? But the thing is, whether you're complaining or not, your boss doesn't have the same context. They're not looking at you the same way as your friends. And there's no way to give it to them because they actually exist in a separate context. Right? And you certainly can't do it in a platform where every post is visible to everyone. That's Boyd's original idea. Context collapses as an audience problem.
But that's not exactly what's happening with algorithms.
No, because but the same logic is running, right? So when your behavior enters an algorithmic system, it sort of collapses in the same way. It's like that system, that amorphous system that you're putting your information into is kind of like that flattened social media audience. So all of this conversation around whether it knows what context you're working within, whether it's something that you can speak to or argue with, all of that gets flattened in the algorithm. And it has no access to explain what you meant. It just has the behavior.
Yeah. Well, with the algorithm, it's not just misread by people. It's misread by a system that then is making decisions.
And I think this is the biggest deal, right? Because it's one thing if there's a human being interpreting the system and making decisions, but now the systems themselves are making decisions with no human review at scale automatically.
Mm.
There is an underlying idea that, yeah, okay, we're going to make a few mistakes, but we're safer, we're better off if we make sure we get all of the bad apples. And that's the kind of situation that we're in now, which is great until you happen to be the one mistakenly identified as a bad apple, right? So
Yeah.
here's what I want you to understand about why this isn't just bad engineering that could be corrected. The inability to hold context is structural, right? It's built into how these systems have to work.
Meaning is not, and what you're meaning by is it's not a choice that somebody made, right?
Not really. It's not like a programmer sat down and said, "Hey, let's ignore intention." Like, that's not the purpose. It's "Hey, everybody." No, it's that in order to process all of this information, in order to do it at scale, and we're looking at millions and billions of interactions, you have to strip it down to what's measurable and comparable. And intention isn't measurable. You can't do a statistical analysis on intention. Reason is not recordable. A click is a click. A purchase is a purchase. A location is a coordinate. A pause on a video is a timestamp. None of these things carry the reason they happened. And the reason is almost always what would distinguish a harmful conclusion about somebody and something from an accurate one, as we talked about with my mother last time, right? So to use this data, the system runs pattern matching. And now it's getting even more sophisticated with AI. People who do X also tend to do Y. That's for operation.
Yeah.
And pattern matching is incredibly powerful and incredibly useful. I mean, it's partly how we can tell the weather, right? Like, pattern matching is a huge tool. It can identify real correlations at a massive scale. And if you're looking at the entire population, it's going to do a really good job. But correlation without context provides conclusions that feel authoritative and are structurally incapable of being right about individuals. Population is kind of okay, but individuals, very often it's going to be wrong.
Yeah, because the pattern is really describing groups, not people, not individuals. It's just saying this group of
It's
people
looking at groups of people as numbers, right? Not as a human being with intention.
yeah,
but
not even as
fluid,
people. Yeah.
right? So it's like the pattern says, "Hey, everybody who bought books in this category purchased things in this other category," which might be true for a meaningful percentage of the group.
Yeah.
Um, and it might be the right way to sell category 2. That might be a great thing to do, because on average, you're going to get more sales that way, but it can't be an effective description of your mother or of yourself or that thing that you searched for or why you visited a neighborhood, because you're not a group. My mother's not a group. You are both people with a reason, and the system has no mechanism for reasons. So here's the analogy that I keep coming back to. So imagine a doctor who can only diagnose you based on your postal code, not your symptoms, not your history, not your current condition, just where you live. Because people in your area have certain health patterns, certain things happen.
Yeah.
Now, for large populations, for the zip code, there's a statistically significant insight. But as a diagnosis for you personally, it's dangerous, right? So if people in your area tend to get some kind of cancer and they start giving you cancer drugs, but you don't have that cancer, that's not going to be good for you. You are not your zip code. You are not your behavior pattern, right? But again, the system only sees the pattern. It doesn't see the individuals.
Yeah, but the problem is that it treats the pattern like a diagnosis.
Right. It treats the pattern like a diagnosis, like an analysis, like a conclusion about the individual. And in some systems like insurance, criminal justice, or hiring, that diagnosis can have significant impact on your day-to-day life. There's a researcher named John Cheney Lippold who wrote a book called We Are Data. And the argument he makes is one that I want to sit with for a minute, because I think it names something important. He argues that algorithmic systems don't just misread you, they create a version of you. It's a data double, a profile built from your behavior patterns that exists inside the system. And that profile gets used to make decisions about you as though it is you, as though that digital profile were you.
So there's Jeff, like actual Jeff, like Jeff I'm talking to right now. And then there's virtual Jeff or Jeff in the system, like the Jeff that exists out there that the system is talking to, pretending that it's actual Jeff.
Pretending it's actual Jeff. And Jeff in the system may be wildly inaccurate. You know, he may share a name and purchase history with me, right? But the context that makes me me, my intentions, reasoning, actions, circumstances, the reasons behind my behavior, none of that makes it into the system. What makes it in is the pattern.
Yeah. But the problem is that the decisions that get made about you in the system are made based on Jeff in the system, not actual Jeff.
And they're based entirely on Jeff in the system. But institutions treat the profile as authoritative, as the real person. And here's what makes that genuinely strange. Traditional identity, who you are, has always been negotiated. You present yourself and other people respond. Think about going to a job interview. You wear a suit, right? I don't wear a suit on a day-to-day basis, but if I go to a job interview, I am wearing a suit because I want to manage that profile, right? And other people respond to it, and you can argue, explain, reframe, demonstrate. So, example, when my suit got lost and I was on a plane and I showed up to a formal meeting in a smelly t-shirt and jeans, I could explain why, right? And it was an explanation that everybody could relate to. Oh, your suit got lost, ha ha. And we could go on and have the meeting. But the data double isn't a conversation. It's assigned to you. The system built the profile. And then the system gets used. So now if somebody's hiring you, they can go look at that profile, and we do it all the time, and make decisions about you, and you don't know what's in it. You can't correct it. And in many cases, you can't even see it.
Man, that's nuts, man. Is there any way, any system where you can actually see it, where you can see what's being said?
Yeah, so there are some. Your credit report in the United States, you have a legal right to access once a year, and you can go dispute errors, right? And that's one of the few areas where there's a formal mechanism for correction. In almost everywhere else, you don't have a right to the information. You may be able to see it, but you don't have a right to it. So if we take Facebook, for example, you can go download your profile and you'll be amazed at the information that it has about you. Or if you use ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to give you a rundown of your profile, and you'll be amazed at what ChatGPT knows about you. But you don't necessarily have the right to see the information. You don't have the right to see why a hiring algorithm rejected you. You probably don't even know that it happened. You don't have the right to see what the data brokers who sell your profile to insurers have on file, or how the insurers are making decisions. The profile exists, it's being used, and from the outside, you see only the consequences: a loan denied, a job not offered, insurance rate that seems inexplicably high. So let me show you this playing out in 4 contexts, because I want you to see the mechanism, not just the story. And first is social media and what you believe, right? So you open your phone, you see a post that outrages you, something you deeply disagree with. You stop, you read, you might even engage, you push back on it. And the system doesn't necessarily see your pushback. It sees the stop, the read, the engagement. It registers. This content kept this user on the platform, and so it's going to surface more content like it. So tomorrow or 5 minutes later, you're going to see more of the same. Your behavior, reading something you disagreed with, collapsed into engaging with this type of content. The system drew a conclusion, and now you are seeing content around that conclusion. And it's not necessarily the wrong conclusion, because it did bring you in. And from the algorithm standpoint, it's able to sell you more ads. So it was the right thing for the algorithm to do, right? But how is that impacting you? What happens when your feed is tailored to those beliefs, those belief systems, and everything, whether you agree with it or disagree with it? All of a sudden, your information is tailored to your group identity.
Mm. And you have no idea, for the most part, why your feed shifted or what. Like sometimes I'll look at something and it shifts and you have no idea why it shifted.
Well, you just notice that the world may seem angrier because a lot of times this is done based on emotional resonance. And so it'll seem angrier and more one-sided. And you can't quite figure out what happened. And everything's more polarized. And that's context collapse, producing an information environment, not just a wrong recommendation, a systematically distorted view of what other people think and believe. So second is hiring, right? Algorithmic resume screening is now so standard at most large companies. You can almost guarantee that your resume is being processed well before a human sees it, if a
Mm.
human ever sees it at all.
What?
The system looks for the patterns, the keywords, education, history, employment gaps, prior employers. My son was interviewing for internships and he had to record a video, and that video was being analyzed by the AI. An employment gap because you were caring for a sick parent. The system doesn't see dedicated family member, it sees a gap. And so it's going to look at the population and say, well, there's someone without a gap, right? It correlates the gap with lower performance scores in the training data. So your application may be rejected automatically, even though you may be a great candidate for the job.
It's all based on what other people with similar gaps did. It has nothing to do with what I.
Right. It's all based on that group dynamic, not on anything about you, on a pattern from a completely different group of people in different circumstances at a different time. Your context, why the gap happened, is invisible. The pattern is all the system has. And so that brings us to criminal justice, right? We mentioned Compass in the last episode, the risk assessment algorithm used in sentencing. But this isn't limited to sentencing. Algorithms are being used for bail decisions, parole recommendations, even predictive policing.
Oh my
And this is
goodness.
happening in a couple places in the United States where we're identifying areas that are likely to have crime or people who are likely to commit crimes based on these data, and then acting based on we perceive people will do.
That one is particularly fraught with, it's just wrong.
Historical policing data reflects historical policing patterns, and they're
Yeah.
just not neutral. If a neighborhood was over policed, there's more arrest data from that neighborhood. The algorithm looks at that data and concludes that the neighborhood has more crime. It recommends more policing, which produces more arrests, which produces more data, which reinforces the recommendation. The original context, historical inequality in policing, is invisible to the system. There's just a pattern, and the pattern tells it to reproduce the conditions that created the pattern.
It's a feedback loop.
It's an automated feedback loop running without review, compounding over time. And then this is the one that surprises people the most because it feels like it shouldn't be subject to this problem. And that's health. So your search data, your location data, your app usage, your fitness tracker data, all of that can be collected, aggregated, and can be sold by data brokers to third parties. Those third parties can include health insurers.
Wait, what? Is that even legal? Is that legal, Jeff? Tell me that that's not legal,
Well,
Jeff. That can't be legal, Jeff.
well, who knows? Health data from your doctor is protected under HIPAA, but behavioral data from your apps and your search history is not. At least not in most contexts. And what you behaviorally do reveals a great deal about your health, right? You search for symptoms of a condition. You bought supplements associated with a condition. Your fitness tracker recorded sleep patterns associated with a condition, right? You visited a medical specialist with which your location data confirms. And none of this is in your medical record. But all of it is building a health profile, and that profile can affect what you're shown in ads, what products you're offered, and in some markets, what you pay for insurance.
So you can search for Alzheimer's symptoms because your mother has it, and something you didn't do and don't have gets attributed to you because you did a search.
Absolutely. So your mother's context doesn't exist in the system, only your search does. And the conclusion is about you. And Alzheimer's is one thing, but what about when you're looking at drug addiction or what happens if I eat only fat for 30 days straight? Well, I doubt you're going to do that, right? But if the system flags you as a massive fat eater, what does that mean for your insurance rates in certain markets? So
Holy
here's what I
moly.
want to name directly, because I think it's the part people resist when they hear it. Because most people, when they learn about context collapse, have one of two reactions. And the first is, oh, I have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter if the system misreads me. And the second is, I'm careful about what I post and search, so I'm probably fine. But both of those are misunderstandings of what's happening.
So why is nothing to hide here? Nothing to hide. I got nothing to hide. Why is that wrong? What is
Because
it they
the
don't get?
problem, because the problem isn't about hiding, it's about accuracy. It's not that you're doing something you'd be ashamed of and the system might find out. It's that the system is making consequential decisions about you based on patterns that do not describe you. So it's not about what you do, and you have no mechanism to correct those judgments. You're not hiding anything. You're just not visible to the system in any meaningful way. What's visible is the pattern. And pattern might be wrong about you. It might be based on your data. It might be based on somebody else's data. It might be about spending habits or location. And that pattern that's wrong about you can cost you money and opportunities, even your freedom, without you ever knowing how that judgment was made.
And why is, because you said two things, right? I'm not hiding anything. The other thing was I'm careful. So why is I'm careful?
Because you're not the only source of data about you. Data brokers aggregate information from hundreds of sources: purchases, location data, social media, public records, loyalty cards, app permissions you forgot you granted years ago. And the profile that exists about you was built from your entire behavior footprint, not just the things you typed into a search bar. That time you got lost in when you were driving, that time when someone falsely accused you of shoplifting, whatever it was, all of that is a part of the profile. So you can't be careful enough to opt out. The system is built to capture everything that's measurable, and everything that's measurable is being captured. And the part that doesn't get said enough is that context collapse isn't going away as systems improve. If anything, Joe, it's getting more consequential.
Yes.
More data, adding data doesn't solve the problem. It just creates more patterns, which generate more conclusions, which are applied to more places and more groups. The profile becomes richer while remaining fundamentally unable to hold what matters to the person. And the authority granted to those systems keeps expanding. Criminal justice, insurance, hiring, credit, immigration, healthcare triage, each of those systems is granting algorithmic conclusions derived from the patterns, the force of institutional authority.
Authority that a person can't challenge.
And in most cases, can't see, can't challenge, can't correct. Right? So my mother's context, her curiosity, her horror at fascism, her reasons never made it into Amazon's system. If it had, the recommendations would have been different, right? She would have been accurately seen. And we keep building systems that process more of us, decide more about us, and have no mechanism for seeing us. The context keeps collapsing. It's not just about your personal versus professional life anymore. It's everything you do and losing all of the context around that.
What do you actually do with this? You can't opt out of having a data profile. So what do you do?
Yeah, you can't. Whether even if you opt out of everything, you still can't do it. But look, you can change how you interact with the conclusions. So the practical thing, the thing that actually matters, is learning to ask two questions, right? Who built my profile? Who built this profile? And what were they optimizing for? So you can look at the data that's coming to you and make different assessments about it. When a system makes a decision about you, when you get a recommendation, offer, a rate, or rejection, something built a model of you to produce that output. And understanding that something was optimizing, understanding what that something was optimizing for tells you a lot about how accurate the model is likely to be.
Mm.
An ad algorithm is optimizing for clicks. A hiring algorithm was optimizing for retention rates and training data. A criminal justice algorithm was optimizing for recidivism predicted from historical arrest data. None of them were optimizing for accuracy. And the second question is, what context am I missing? Because when you see content that seems to confirm exactly what you already believe, with remarkable consistency, ask what's been filtered out. The system didn't show you a balanced view. It showed you what kept you engaged. The context of everything that was excluded is invisible to you, which means that your sense of what's normal, what's common, what other people think may have been built by a system that stripped the context out.
So knowing the mechanism changes how you read the output or how you interact with that output.
Yeah, it changes how you interact with the output. And it helps you avoid mistaking the pattern for truth. And it's sort of a funny thing, right? Because the question is, well, how can I avoid the pattern? You can't really. It really comes down to all of us working with the pattern. How are you going to engage with the pattern? How are you going to work with the pattern? How are you going to work with the data? And if you go back to the credit reports, it used to be that we didn't have access to our credit reports. And then people said, no, wait, I want access to this. I want to be able to control what data goes into the profiles that are making decisions about me. And as a group, as a population, we can push back on these things and demand more transparency.
Mm.
But as an individual, again, there's not a lot you can do. Every system that processes your behavior builds a version of you. That version has no access to your reasons, and somewhere right now, decisions are being made based on it. In the next episode, we'll talk about affective amplification, which is a really cool term that I just want to say a few times because it sounds really grown up, right? But the idea here is why outrage travels faster than truth and what happens when an algorithm's job is to keep you emotional.